Hey, and welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, thank you so much for checking me out. Today, I wanted to go over some essential mapping of the fretboard following something you may have heard before, the CAGED system. So without further ado, we'll get right into it. Thank you so much for being here. CAGED. So that's 5 shapes we need to learn. And it's really all of our major chord, basic cowboy first position chords. We're looking at a C shape, which is your standard 3rd fret off the A string, Dust in the Wind, La Bamba chord. And then we have our standard A shape. Hoping you're all familiar with these. If not, please check out some of my previous videos. A shape, so that's open A string, and then D, G, and B string, 2nd fret. Okay, and then our G shape. Maybe a lot of people's first chord here, the G. 3rd fret on our low E string. Really, it's all about the shapes here today. And then we go to our E shape. We have our low E string, and then this shape here. And then that brings us to our D shape, which looks like this, kind of like a triangle on the bottom 3 strings. So without moving into those chords, I just played for you a C chord, an A, a G, an E, and a D. However, that's not what the CAGED system is. It is now taking these shapes and then taking the same chord and transforming it into its shape. So we have a C chord here in C shape formation. But maybe you've ran into this fella. Maybe you have like a punk song or a little more indie situation. You know, something that would sound a little odd if you played a kind of a cowboy C. Still the same chord, but just a different shape for it. So we call this our A shape because it still has this A shape. So this 2-2-2 with A, so 0, 2, 2, 2, 0 and 2 are 2 frets apart. So, but that's A. If we go here to C, 3rd fret A string, now we have 5, 5, 5, 2 above 3. I wouldn't play it like this with the fingers necessarily. I always kind of put a bar on it and omit the high E string, because that gets us all the notes we need. These are still basic triad chords, just the notes are kind of rearranged. Also known as inversions, if you're a little more savvy. But we're not going to get into too much of that today, okay? Even though this is exactly that. Okay, so we have our C cowboy chord off our A string root. Still off that A string root, we now have the A shape, so C, A, but still a C chord. This is a C chord. So we have this little bar here. I'm going to start referring to this as a wall. So this is the A shape. If we now take our index finger to build our wall and come up like this, this now brings us into our G shape. The beautiful thing about the CAGED system is everything's connected here. So our common link between our cowboy chord and our A shape was our root note, this bass note A string root. And then we have this bar established. That becomes our next anchor point, bringing us to our G shape. So this is kind of an odd one. You don't really see people play like a G chord or a C chord in a G shape like this. You know, maybe if there's like a capo here, but that's a whole different conversation. This is more of like a reference of where the notes are for your chord. So I see this top three notes here, arpeggio. You know, that spells a C chord. And basically what our finger's doing here is taking the place of the nut, you know, the 0 fret, if you will. So, you know, I'm switching my fingers around so I can get this high E string. But this shape right here has a lot of awesome little tasty licks in it, little riffs. As does each position in this system. But this one I think in particular is like not a chord anyone would ever play in a standard kind of sense. I mean, it's not very comfortable for starters. But all the licks you know in G, they all move up. If that makes sense. You know, so these are just referential shapes to help guide you down. Okay, so we have our C, A, G, so that now brings us to E. And this one, for a lot of beginners, could be challenging, but something you need to work up to. It's just your standard bar chord. So we had our E shape in the onset, just as your normal E. Notice what fingers I'm using here. Keeping the index finger out of the equation here at first position. So if this is E, and I move this up, this is our 8th fret, high E string. Well, that's a C note. And then we build an E chord shape beneath it. So once again, our anchor point coming from our G chord, our G shape, is our C note right here on the low E string. So we're just taking that same low E string note, the C note, and now building an E chord in front of it. So a way to think about this little transitional area here is you have an E chord shape right here off your low E string. So that's in front of the wall, in front of the bar. And then behind the bar, you have this G shape. So G, E. So they're the same chord, just rearranging the notes once again. So bar chords I know are challenging for a lot of beginners. I think a lot has to do with the thumb placement. You know, I like to be kind of right here on the skunk stripe, but you know, I have a pretty average sized thumb. It's not double jointed, it does, you know, nothing weird. But even if it was, you know, you find the best leverage point for you kind of directly behind or somewhere behind your index finger, kind of making that squeeze. But you know what, this isn't a lesson about bar chords today necessarily, but just the concept here. So we have an E chord shape. E chord, C chord. Also the beauty of bar chords. Once you get your first bar chord, typically an F for a lot of people, once you have this shape, now you have all the chords, all the major chords right there. But we are at the 8th fret, low E string, E chord shape, also known as a C bar chord. Okay, so that brings us to our next and final position, the D shape. Okay, so like I was saying, everything shares a wall here. There's some sort of connecting link between the shapes. In this case, it's going to be the octave of our bar chord, which is on the D string now. So this is going to be kind of our D string root shape. And there's our C chord shape once again, our little triangle. Okay, this is another shape that I don't really see people play too often, at least the full chord here, but they will play the tiny little triad. up here on the G, B, and E string. So the way I actually like to think about this is the B string root. If I can find whatever chord I'm trying to find, in this example C, find a C note, which of course is right next to my B note, 12th fret, B string, my C note, and then I build this triangle, D chord shape, well, guess what? Now I have a C chord in a D shape, excluding this note that we linked over from the bar chord, kind of acting as our bass note. That's all 5 shapes. So I'll recap it again. So we have C chord shape. We have C chord, A chord shape. We have our C chord, G chord shape. We have a C chord in the shape of an E chord or a bar chord. And then we have a C chord. Then we have a C chord in the shape of a D chord. Also still a C chord. So, like I said, for sticking around, I'm going to give you a few little insights I have here about the CAGED system that dawned on me as I was learning this, and hopefully could benefit you and aid you in learning this quicker and getting to apply this in a musical way. Let's say we have a 1-chord loop. Let me throw down a little thing here real fast. I'm just going to play a C chord, okay? Just C. Here we go. 1, 2, here we go. Okay, so hopefully you can hear my C chord looping now. We can now take these CAGED shapes and single pick through them, arpeggiate them, and just see how it all lays down. A shape, G chord, E chord, E shape rather, D chord shape, just kind of the bottom of the bar chord. Okay, so hopefully that just brings home that this is the same chord. It's going to function underneath all the same. But let's say you're in a band, or you're writing parts for a band, or your own project, and you've established an acoustic guitar, cowboy chords, and you don't know what to play for your second guitar or your third guitar, whatever the case may be. Maybe you're layering, you're doubling guitars, and you want to have the sound be more expansive. So your first guitar will play maybe a standard kind of open acoustic chord, but then your other backing track can do, let's say, like a G chord shape. So you got your C chord going down, and then your other guitar that's real basic, just to try it, but it adds a texture. Maybe just hit that. Okay, so now I have like a thicker string involved now. It's a more rounded sound I've created. So now I want a twiddly bit. I want something a little more chimey, so I'm going to borrow from my A shape. Just going to get the bottom 3 strings, so just like our A chord shape, move it all up, and this index finger would be acting as the nut here for our A string, for our A chord rather. Okay, so now we're over here, 5, 5, 3. flute that. Okay, so now I got a little more harmony happening, but it's still the same chord. Okay, we'll turn that off because it's a little bit distracting. But the idea here is this is how you layer parts. This is how you come with more creative ideas, to texturize your songs, to give yourself something to work with. And if you're doing more lead playing, well, then this is your bread and butter right here, ladies and gentlemen. And you know what? I really want to give a shout out to my 4% lady audience. Girls, thank you so much for being here. I really think this is your generation to show the world what you're made of. It's not just Taylor Swift and Oranthe and her. You know, a lot of female players now getting a little more recognition, and I'm super behind that. So just a little rant, but thank you so much for being here, ladies. Let's get it. Okay, so for your lead players, this could be your bread and butter right here. So we have your C chord. You know, C is going on. Rhythm player. You just kind of find these shapes and find clever ways to get in and out of them. So I'm going root, sliding up to the third from the second, and then I'm tagging this bar here, this shape. So you can make cool licks and riffs just from these shapes. So let me dial it back. We'll go back to just our C chord here. 1, 2, here we go. All right, C chord again. C. Okay, so I hope you can see how you can just take these shapes, find clever ways in and out of them. Like on the way out of there, I just kind of arpeggiated each note descending. Kind of in and out there. But I'm still playing the same notes, you know, of our chord. And then you have your like Wish You Were Here Pink Floyd licks, or wings, if you will. Shout out Paul McCartney. Little known guy, up and coming artist, Paul McCartney. You may have heard of him. You know, I think he's gonna be a big deal one day. Anyway, so then you get to your bar chord shape. And of course, this is just full of potential ways you can change your chord. Or what I was playing earlier was just like a little section of it from the D string down. And, you know, from here you can hammer the 4. If you're a thumb guy or thumb gal, you can reach over, grab your C note with your thumb, Hendrix style. So another way to use C to embellish just some chords, some shapes lend themselves to certain actions. So adding a sus or dropping the pinky out and making your 7, for a little transition, voice leading. This bar chord shape is really great for that. And then to bring us to our final shape again, the D chord shape, same thing here, kind of lends itself to sus4. But it's also, on the thinner string, so it's a little more twiddly biddly. You can do the Weezer trick. Or, a lot of bands do this, but my mind, I kind of think of Weezer. Just hit the little 2 notes on the bottom, the B and the E string, which in this shape is our root and our third. These are the 5 shapes to help map the entire fretboard. It's a system that loops, CAGED, once you get back to your D chord shape. It hops back around to your C again. So the wall that we share from our D chord back to our C chord shape is right here on the B string. You know, and this will definitely help you map the dustier bit of the guitar. You know, the end of the fretboard here doesn't get as much love unless you're, you know, playing leads and getting into your inner Malmsteen here. But yeah, this will help fill in the blanks, as it were. Everything that happens right here at the open fret repeats again right here past the 12th fret. So if you learn all your CAGED shapes up here, well, guess what? You're also learning them down here. So this will aid you in soloing so you don't get lost. It will help you move through chord changes, help you move through your lines. So I hope this has all been very entertaining, educational, informative, all that. And